Hi everyone. I want to just give you a brief overview because we're in week 7 of our class. I cannot believe it. We've got Mary Oliver up for this week, and in addition to our Donlin Voices authors, which I'll highlight in a second here on our notes. So we're in our week 7. Our class, last quote unquote day of class is Friday, October 9th. So for this week here, when you go through your directions and everything that comes about with that, try to make it a little shorter so you can have time to actually focus on everything. You have your final podcast due on the 8th. You have your 6 blog posts due on Wednesday. All comments in by the last day of class. These are your choice of selections from Donlin Voices this week to focus on. You are completing annotations for the poems by Mary Oliver. They're here and they're also on the annotation page as well. You'll work on your final project, so some dates to keep in mind are listed. I know I went through these last week as well, and if you didn't get a chance, I moved them down to look through the notes and the prompt that I video recorded for last week. Make sure you do that too, so you can just kind of get a good sense of what's happening. So your selections from Donlin Voices this week, and that's what you're sharing for your blog posts. And I really hope you've enjoyed the small selection that we've got to look. I hope one day I can devote a whole entire class to just the Donlin Voices anthology. That would be, such an awesome thing, I think, to do. And like I said, just looking at Mary Oliver as one of our last poets for this week. So I think that should really help us get through the amount of work. Going back here to week 7, from week 6, I actually moved your prompt and video notes down here so you have them in the forefront. Later this week, I'll open up an entirely separate module for submitting final work. Again, you still have time to work on that, but so you can put it on your calendar and your due dates up here as well. And then everything else is up here for sharing your blog, your podcast, and of course your annotations from Mary Oliver's poems can go. They're not on the Poetry Foundation, they're on a different site, but you should be able to highlight, annotate, and be okay with that when you go through. I'll talk a little bit about Mary Oliver. I'm hoping some of you have heard of her before. She passed away last year, actually, and she's one of the, I would say, probably most contemporary popular poets of our time that we can really read and look at today. Lots of themes of nature, belonging, identity, the reliance of the land. Again, I know these themes are not unfamiliar to you, but certainly I know that you'll find lots of different correlations. As you can see, her poetry focuses on a lot of quiet occurrences of nature. Her poetry feels very quiet as well. Though it contains great multitudes and it contains a lot of symbolism that you can find in there as well. So it's very accessible to read and to write. Even though she's born in Ohio, she's really influenced by a lot of different poets, one being Edna St. Vincent Millay. If you've ever been with Dr. Jackson, you know he studies Edna St. Vincent Millay. And Millay is actually, she grew up a little bit in New England. You'll find her on the Maine Women's Writer page. In a longer class, we would have read a little bit more of her poetry. But now, you can see some of that influence if you want to read a little bit more in here going in there as well. Mary Oliver was super private in her life. She had her longtime partner, Molly Malone Cook, and the majority of her life was lived in Massachusetts around the Cape Cod landscape, and that can definitely have a lot of influence on her work. The setting, the way that she writes about the natural landscape are very much deeply rooted in New England, and of course, as you can see here, rooted in place and the romantic nature kind of tradition, which is really important to look at as well. So throughout this time, she's writing prolifically with many different books of poetry, as you can see throughout this time period that that has been done. She does have some works that go from just engaging the natural world to more personal realms. I think personally both kind of overlap in her poetry as well, but certainly you can kind of make that distinction as you go through. I think especially in some of her more famous poetry, you can see who she's sort of been compared to in terms of other American poets, and I'm sure some of these names won't surprise you in any sort of way. She did also write prose. Poetry was really her main portion that she wrote, but she did also write prose. You can see here her main themes continue to be the intersection between the human and the natural world, the limits of human consciousness and language and articulating meaning. So, I think in her work she'll find even a lot of correlation to the writings that we read in Dawnland Voices. The New York Times actually, when she passed away last year, did a really nice job. I'll link to her obituary on here. And I think they really captured it best when they say her poems are built of unadorned language and accessible imagery, have a pedagogical, almost homiletic quality to them. You will find that her poems are not long by any means. They are pretty brief. And in a way, her poems kind of do feel like therapy that you're going to read. And they are going to evoke, in a sense, they might even remind you a little bit of Sarah Orne Jewett's prose from like The White Heron, because of how much animal imagery and nature that Mary Oliver really uses in her style. And you can find in here, I think, other correlations to make. Certainly, yeah, you might even liken her to Emily Dickinson. So one of the poems we are reading for this week is When Death Comes. Now, to bring this one up a little bit more, you might find some similarities to, yeah, you might find some similarities to, looking at Emily Dickinson, or how death has kind of been transcended and written about. Like, for example, we looked about how Anne Sexton kind of wrote about death, but how is Mary Oliver kind of facing this? She also uses lots of questions in her prose and her poetry as well. So that might be something else that you want to look over. And I would agree, her poems have intimacy to them, and her work has just been really quite well received over the years, with a lot of immense different parts. I'll also link to some of her video here because I think it's good to hear her. That's the beauty of looking at a contemporary writer, contemporary poet, is that you can actually hear her reading some of these pieces. So I will link to that and post in some of the annotations so you can actually, latch on and kind of have that too. And there's a great Brain Pickings article on Mary Oliver as well, that I hope you'll kind of look at a little bit more, and just thinking about, there's some great pictures of her with her partner. There's just some great details into her life that I think are really quite interesting to kind of look at as well. So she's our only writer for this week aside from Dawnland Voices that we're going to be looking at. Now, I am linking to the Poetry Foundation on here. Like I said, the poems that we're reading are not directly on here. I would totally encourage you to look and read a little bit more of these. These, when you look at them, are not there. I guess you could say sort of like they're downloaded from JSTOR, so it's not as easy to annotate directly on here. So I have some other links that make it a little bit easier to annotate her poetry outside of this too. But I would say read and reread some of the lines in her poems. For example, this is one of her most famous poems we're reading for this week, called Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. So I really encourage you to read out loud, to listen out loud, because I think you get a much greater sense too of the flow of her poems. You could pay attention to the repetition. You can pay attention to the beautiful imagery and whom you think she's speaking to in some of these pieces as well. So I'm excited. Thank you all so much for all your great hard work on all of your annotations and all of the writers. Even in just 7 weeks, we've covered such a great deal of writing that I really hope some of these will inspire you to go back and read a little bit more. I have way more authors that we totally could have covered if we had, more time. Of a full 14 weeks, I think would have maybe added in a couple more, but I'm more than happy to recommend, you know, if you'd like to continue your study of some more New England women writers, I would love that and would love to make more recommendations too.